Welcome to War Bios, the podcast that delves into the most pivotal battles in history, where strategy, leadership, and courage are put to the ultimate test. Today, we're going to explore one of the most iconic and influential battles of the ancient world, the Battle of Cannae. This legendary clash between Rome and Carthage is a masterclass in tactical genius, adaptability, and the unyielding pursuit of victory. The First Punic War, fought from 264 to 241 BC, was a brutal and transformative conflict that saw Rome emerge victorious, but at great cost. The war had been sparked by a complex web of alliances, trade agreements, and territorial disputes, which ultimately led to a clash between the two dominant powers of the Mediterranean. Hannibal Barca, the brilliant and ambitious Carthaginian general, had grown up with the desire to avenge his father's defeats and reclaim Carthage's lost territories. His father, Hamilcar Barca, had been a renowned commander who had fought against Rome in the First Punic War, and his legacy would shape Hannibal's strategic thinking. In 218 BC, Hannibal embarked on an audacious campaign, marching his army of nearly 40,000 soldiers, including war elephants, from Spain into Italy, determined to challenge Roman supremacy. This daring feat, which would become one of the most famous military maneuvers in history, was motivated by a combination of strategic calculation and personal ambition. Hannibal sought to exploit the divisions within the Roman Republic, which was still reeling from the aftermath of the First Punic War, and to create a new balance of power in the Mediterranean. As Hannibal's forces entered the Italian peninsula, they were met with a mixture of awe and terror by the local populations. The Romans, confident in their military prowess, dispatched two consular armies to confront the invaders. The first major encounter took place at the Battle of the Trebia, where Hannibal outmaneuvered and defeated the Roman forces, despite being outnumbered. This initial victory set the tone for the subsequent campaigns, showcasing Hannibal's tactical brilliance and his ability to inspire loyalty in his troops. The following year, 217 BC, saw the Battle of Lake Trasimene, another decisive Carthaginian victory that further eroded Roman confidence. The Roman consuls, eager to restore their honor and protect their territory, began to mobilize larger forces to confront Hannibal. Meanwhile, Hannibal continued his march through Italy, pillaging and plundering as he went, but always keeping his ultimate goal in sight: to defeat the Romans on their own soil and force them to negotiate a peace favorable to Carthage. In the summer of 216 BC, the Roman Senate appointed two new consuls, Lucius Aemilius Paulus and Gaius Terentius Varro, with the explicit task of putting an end to Hannibal's campaign. The Romans assembled a massive army, estimated to be between 50,000 to 80,000 soldiers, one of the largest forces they had ever fielded. This formidable host was designed to crush Hannibal once and for all, but the Carthaginian general remained undaunted. The terrain around Cannae, with its rolling hills and vast plains, seemed tailor-made for a grand clash of arms. Hannibal, aware of the numerical superiority of his enemy, began to formulate a plan that would exploit the weaknesses of the Roman formation, using the very land itself as a weapon against them. The armies drew closer, their scouts and skirmishers engaging in a delicate dance of reconnaissance and deception. The air was thick with tension, as both sides knew that the outcome of this battle would determine the fate of empires. Hannibal's soldiers, a diverse mix of Africans, Spaniards, and Gauls, stood ready, their hearts filled with the promise of victory or the glory of death. The Romans, driven by their duty to protect their republic and their people, steeled themselves for the bloodiest of conflicts. The Roman army, led by consuls Paulus and Varro, was a force to be reckoned with. Its legions were organized into tight formations, with the triarii, the most experienced soldiers, forming the backbone of the army. The hastati and principes, younger and less experienced soldiers, made up the front lines, while the velites, lightly armed skirmishers, provided a screen of protection for the main body of the army. Hannibal's army, on the other hand, was a more fluid and adaptable force. His infantry was organized into a series of crescent-shaped formations, with the strongest units at the center and the weakest on the flanks. The Carthaginian cavalry, composed of Numidian and Spanish horsemen, was deployed on the wings, ready to exploit any weakness in the Roman line. As the two armies faced each other on the scorching plains of Cannae, the air was electric with anticipation, heavy with the scent of sweat, bloodlust, and the promise of glory. Hannibal, however, had no intention of attacking the Romans head-on, for he was a master of the unconventional, a weaver of tactical intricacies that would leave his enemies bewildered and broken. On August 206 BC, the battle began with a series of skirmishes between the Roman velites, those lightly armed and highly mobile infantrymen, and the Carthaginian cavalry, whose Numidian horsemen darted in and out of range with ease, their horses' hooves pounding the dry earth like a deadly drumbeat. Meanwhile, Hannibal's infantry formed up into their distinctive crescent-shaped formation, with the strongest units at the center and the weakest on the flanks, a deliberate weakening of his line that would prove to be a siren's call to the Romans. As the Romans advanced, they found themselves facing a seemingly impenetrable wall of Carthaginian shields, a barrier of bronze and wood that seemed to stretch on forever. But Hannibal had deliberately created a vulnerable point in his center, a subtle trap that he hoped the Romans would exploit with their characteristic aggressiveness. And exploit it they did, pouring forward in a dense column to attack the Carthaginian center, their momentum and confidence driving them deeper into the heart of the enemy's formation. The Roman legions, driven by their centuries-old tradition of martial valor, pushed deep into the Carthaginian formation, creating a bulge in the line that seemed to promise a decisive breakthrough. But Hannibal had anticipated this move, his mind sharpened by years of campaigning against the Romans and their allies. He knew that the key to victory lay not in head-on collision, but in manipulation, in using the enemy's strength against them. The Libyan and Spanish troops, fighting with fierce determination, began to push inwards from the sides, compressing the Roman column into an ever tighter space, a killing zone where escape was impossible and death inevitable. The result was a catastrophic collapse of the Roman formation, a debacle that would be etched into the annals of military history as one of the greatest defeats of all time. As the Carthaginians closed in from all sides, the Romans found themselves trapped, unable to maneuver or escape, their shields and spears no match for the encircling enemy. The Triarii, those seasoned veterans who had formed the backbone of the Roman army, were cut down where they stood, their bodies broken and battered, their last thoughts consumed by the horror of defeat. The carnage was appalling, with bodies piled high on the battlefield, a ghastly testament to the brutality of war. The Romans, caught in a vortex of steel and bloodlust, were slaughtered in their thousands, their cries echoing across the plain as they fell beneath the relentless onslaught of the Carthaginian troops. Consul Lucius Emulus Paulus, fighting bravely alongside his men, fell to the ground mortally wounded, his last thoughts consumed by the agony of defeat and the knowledge that his army was doomed. The Roman horsemen, already reeling from the earlier skirmishes, were quickly overwhelmed, and their commander, Gaius Terentius Varro, fled the battlefield in panic, abandoning his men to their fate. The rout was complete. The Romans, broken and demoralized, streamed away from the battlefield in disorder, pursued by the triumphant Carthaginians, who cut them down without mercy. As he surveyed the blood-soaked plain, littered with the bodies of his enemies, Hannibal must have felt a sense of pride and satisfaction, knowing that he had achieved something truly remarkable. The scale of the Roman defeat was staggering, with estimates suggesting that between 50,000 to 80,000 Roman soldiers were killed or captured at Cannae, a loss that would take years for the Roman Republic to recover from. The scale of the Roman defeat was staggering, with estimates suggesting that between 50,000 to 80,000 Roman soldiers were killed or captured at Cannae, their lifeless forms strewn across the blood-soaked terrain, like autumn leaves scattered by an unforgiving wind. The Carthaginian losses, while significant, were substantially lower, with around 6,000 casualties, a grim reminder of the devastating efficiency of Hannibal's tactics. In the aftermath of the battle, Hannibal's strategic genius was evident in his treatment of the Roman prisoners. Rather than slaughtering them outright, he chose to release many of the low-ranking soldiers, hoping to create divisions within Rome and undermine the authority of the Roman Republic. This move also had a practical purpose, as it allowed Hannibal to conserve resources and focus on the next phase of his campaign, a calculated decision that would ultimately prove crucial in the war's outcome. As news of the disaster at Cannae spread throughout Italy, the Roman Republic was plunged into crisis, its very foundations shaken by the magnitude of the defeat. The city of Rome itself was thrown into a state of panic, With many expecting an imminent Carthaginian invasion, their minds racing with worst-case scenarios and their hearts heavy with foreboding. However, Hannibal's decision not to march on Rome would prove to be a crucial turning point in the war, a choice that would haunt him for the rest of his life and spark endless debate among historians. Despite his victory at Cannae, Hannibal's ultimate goal of defeating Rome and securing a lasting peace proved elusive, a tantalizing mirage that seemed to recede further into the distance with each passing day. As the war dragged on, Hannibal's resources were slowly drained, his army depleted by the constant fighting and his supply lines stretched to the breaking point. As the Roman historian Polybius would later write, "The Battle of Cannae was the most brilliant achievement of Hannibal's career, and one which would have been impossible for any other commander. The echoes of that fateful day would reverberate throughout history, influencing military strategists and inspiring future generations of commanders to study and emulate Hannibal's masterpiece." Today, the Battle of Cannae is remembered as a landmark event in military history, studied by strategists and historians around the world. Its influence can be seen in the tactics and strategies employed by military commanders throughout the ages, from Napoleon to Patton, each seeking to replicate the genius of Hannibal's encirclement maneuver. That's all for today's War Bios. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, I'm General Biography, reminding you to keep marching toward victory.